Hello, welcome to this episode of the Private Aviation Insider's Guide. I have found an amazing insider who has an incredible story to share with you. Joanna Meek flies a Legacy 650 with her husband, which is a great perk, I think, for the owner of this aircraft to have one hotel room and one couple that flies the airplane together. Obviously, their communication is incredible and they know each other very well and work together very well to be able to do this. And Joanna, I am so thrilled that I got the female half of your team today because you know me, I'm all about interviewing female pilots whenever I can so that we can encourage more young women to enter this field. I was with someone yesterday who said women are the best pilots, and it was a guy. So on that note, welcome.
Well, thank you, Renee. I feel honored to be included in this.
Well, let's jump right in and talk about the Legacy 650. And I know you were flying the Legacy 600 before this. So can you talk a little bit about how long you've been flying on this platform so we can establish a base here?
Sure. Well, you know, the Legacy 600 and 650 both fall under the category of the EMB 135 BJ. So they're essentially the same aircraft. The 650 is an upgraded version of the 600. So I started flying the Legacy 600, gosh, it's been about 4 years now, a little over 4 years. And it was very interesting because our Legacy 600 was one of the first Legacy 600s. So essentially it was built to be a shuttle, and Embraer had the idea of, hey, let's kind of convert this into a corporate executive jet. So we had a lot of unique features on our Legacy 600. So about a year and a half ago, when our airplane owner decided that he would like to find a replacement aircraft, we were sent on the venture of looking at various different corporate aircraft that fit his specifications. And we repeatedly kept coming back to the Legacy. So we looked at the Legacy 650, which is a newer version. And actually, it's like the new improved model to the Legacy 600.
What's different in it?
First and foremost, the engines. And our Legacy 600, like I said, was an older model. So we had the original Rolls-Royce A1P engines on it. And those engines provided about 8,200 pounds of thrust. Now, on some of the 600s, they upgraded the engines to be the A1E model, and that provided about 600 extra pounds of thrust. Well, in our Legacy 650, we have the A2 engines, and we have about 9,300 pounds of thrust on it. So now we have 1,100 pounds more thrust per side, which is a big deal because we go in and out of a lot of smaller airports. And frequently, because we live in a warmer environment, it's hotter. So we need the better performance, and it makes a huge difference getting off of a short runway with higher powered engines. In addition to that, they're more fuel efficient. So even though we have more thrust, our fuel burns the same as what we were having in the Legacy 600. Our range is significantly improved. Based on the way we fly the plane, we rarely fly at long range cruise. We typically cruise at 0.76 or 0.78. We get about 2 hours more endurance out of the aircraft, which is very nice because that means now we can do Europe trips with just one fuel stop. So it's incredible.
That's great. You're flying from the middle of the US, so it's like going from a coast.
Right. So I mean, if someone were based on the Northeast coast, they could launch from there and go to Europe without any issue at all. We'll get fuel somewhere in the Northeast that's inexpensive, quick and easy, and I just require one fuel stop to do the trip. The speeds are also increased on the Legacy 650 as far as VMO. Now at 8,000 feet instead of being restricted to 250 knots, which we are legally anyway. So, but the increase to 300 knots at that altitude is a big deal when we're cruising around places like Teterboro or Chicago, where they want you to maintain 250 knots. And in the 600, that was right at VMO. So every now and then, if turbulence or what have you, if you bumped up to 251, well, now you have the speed warning going off, which is awfully embarrassing when you hear ding, 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 high speed. And, the passengers can hear it. So they're probably wondering, what are we doing up here? So that increased speed has been great. But what I really love too is for our landing flaps 45 is what we typically land with. They've increased that minimum speed to, or the maximum speed to 160 knots versus 145 knots, which is really nice because a lot of times going to these bigger airports, they want you to maintain max forward speed to hit the outer marker. And if you have to go from that to slowing down to put in flaps 45 at 145 knots, it's sometimes difficult to configure appropriately. So then we land with flaps 22, which is fine by legacy standards. Well, now that increases your landing distance and what have you. So the increased speed to 160 knots for flaps 45 is wonderful.
So performance is spot on, and the improvements were things that you would have wanted anyway.
They are.
And I know that some of your missions are really short and some of your missions are a little bit longer. What do you feel like the sweet spot is for the Legacy 650?
Well, that's what's great about the Legacy 650 is we can do really short flights, like 26-minute flights, or tiny little flights, and which is another benefit of 650. You have a higher max landing weight, which is wonderful because we can go into smaller fields that may not have Jet A and bring our own fuel in, but not be worried about being overweight for the landing, carrying an extra fuel with us. But the plane performs really well on short missions. And like I said, we did Europe, and our longest flight we've done in the plane coming back from Europe was 8.5 hours. So, the plane's capable to do either one. So it's a very versatile aircraft.
You were reading my mind because I was just going to ask you what the longest flight is that you've had. What's been your most challenging flight in a Legacy?
Honestly, I don't think I've had a challenging flight on the Legacy. The plane is very reliable, very predictable. It's extremely safe. My background, I have a master's in aviation safety, so safety is very important to me. With the Legacy, there's so much redundancy in systems that even when we're over the North Atlantic, we didn't have to fear, oh, what if we lose a generator? Well, we lose a generator, we have 4 more generators to pick from, So there's so much redundancy to safe aircraft, and I honestly can't think of any challenges we've faced in the aircraft.
Tell me about the pilot workload in the cockpit and what the flow is there and how you feel the plane performs and sets itself up to spread the pilot workload out when you're flying.
The pilot workload in this aircraft is really low, surprisingly so. It's not very automated. You look at the Gulfstreams and some of the Falcons and such, and there's so much automation in the systems. But the Legacy is still pretty basic. There's a lot of pilot interaction involved, but the plane is very intuitive and communicates everything. If something's not right, or if you forget to transfer fuel and it's time to start transferring fuel, to remind you, hey, guess what, idiot, you forgot to transfer fuel. So, it communicates with you. It's very straightforward in the systems. Embraer has done an excellent job with their checklists, their pre-flight checklist, their engine start checklist. All their checklists are extremely simple. They follow a logical flow. As far as memory items are concerned during emergency procedures, they've done a great job to kind of consolidate similar issues that might come into play. So your memory items are going to be similar for various items, and they limit the memory items to like 2 or 3 things. And then from that point, you can go to the QRH or the checklist and follow the rest of the procedures. So the pilot workload in the aircraft is relatively low.
Fantastic. Well, let's talk about comfort. I know, and I love this about you, that you wear a skirt when you fly.
I do.
Talk about climbing in the cockpit and how comfortable the cockpit is for someone who's flying in a skirt or someone who's tall or maybe short.
Yes. Well, I'm barely 5'2", so I'm on the smaller side of things. But the cockpit is fully adjustable to accommodate the size of the pilot. The cockpit is enormous. Our owner laughs that it's a small apartment. So it's comfortable. We don't ever bring a third pilot with us, and we don't put people on the jump seat. I don't know how comfortable the cockpit would be if we were forced to fly with somebody sitting right behind our shoulders. It would get cramped quickly, but the seats fully adjust up and down, forward and back. The Rudder pedals move forward, which is important for me. The cockpit is roomy and very comfortable. And there's plenty of stuff to store anything you want in the cockpit with you. So for instance, like for me, very concerned about sun in the cockpit. So I keep an extra sun visor I can put up. I keep sunscreen up there with me. I have my sunglasses. So it's a great setup.
So moving back, tell me about the passenger comfort. I'm sure you hear a lot about that.
I do. The passengers love the cabin, and honestly, I do too. I'm very proud of our plane. When we land and go places, I'm proud to show it off. But the passengers love it because it's a 6-foot cabin. So for the most part, most people can comfortably walk through it without having to crouch down too much. It's about 7 feet wide, so there's plenty of space in the aisle between the seats. But what's wonderful about it is we have 3 distinct sections. So in the front of the cabin, you have your club seating, which is great for socializing. In the center of the cabin is the conference table or the dining table, which is, really neat when a family's on board and they can sit together as a family and have a meal together as a family. And then in the rear of the aircraft, we have a divan that can berth into a bed, and we carry a jet bed as well. So on the 2 seats across from the divan, we can set the jet bed up and passengers can sleep back there. And we have a curtain that can be pulled, so that whole section can be a bedroom on a long flight with the rear lab behind there that those passengers would have access to. And then in the front of the cabin, we have a forward lab, which is wonderful, which if people in the back sleeping, then the people in the front would be able to utilize that. But mostly it's utilized by Scott and I. And it's a lot of people, we talked about, because our Legacy 600 did not have a forward lab. So when we talked to people about how much is the forward lab ever used, is it convenient, people kind of had mixed reviews on the forward lab. But personally, I love it. I think it's wonderful.
What about the galley? What do you hear about the galley?
The galley is quite large, actually. And in the 650, it's very nice because we have an oven as well as a microwave, a very large ice drawer. So we're able to get all our catering into there. In addition, we have a refrigerator, which is wonderful. When we transitioned from the 600 to the 650, we had a cabin attendant that was with us full time. And her biggest complaint about the 650 was the fact that now we had the forward lab. So we lost the forward closet, which meant a lot of storage was lost. In addition, in our Legacy 600, we had a custom china cabinet built out, which meant all the plates fit perfectly in there, all the silverware fit perfectly, the wine glasses fit perfectly in there, and we lost that as well. So it just required a little bit more creativity on storage. But in the Legacy, that's not a problem because of the baggage area. So we cannot fit in the galley more than fits in the back of the aircraft.
And that was my next, you are reading my mind, girl. That was my next question. I'm just moving back through the plane and you're 3 steps ahead of me. Talk to me about the luggage capacity of the aircraft and accessing that from the rear lab.
Well, I transitioned from the Hawker into the Legacy. So when I saw the luggage area of the Legacy, I was in heaven. For one, in the Hawker, it was in the front of the aircraft, which was a little tacky when you board and you're looking at everybody's bags. It was very limited, and as a flight crew, our bags were the last ones to go on. And sometimes that meant they didn't go on at all because there was not enough room for the passenger bags. The Legacy book values, the cargo area holds 1,000 pounds of luggage. Our particular aircraft is limited to 994 pounds, but it's enormous. It's 6 feet tall. It's about 7 feet wide, probably about 8 feet deep. And I like to tell people you could square dance in there. It's huge. So we never worry about how much luggage is coming on board as far as being able to fit it in there, which is great. You know, if you're traveling during Christmas and people have Christmas gifts plus the skis plus their own luggage, it's not like playing a game of Tetris to make it fit. It actually fits great in there. And we frequently even use it I do, as a dressing room because I've learned a good lesson in aviation that if I check into the hotel in my pilot uniform, they tend to not give me the best room because they somehow think I did not pick that place to stay that my company did it for me. Whereas I've learned if I put on my normal clothes and check in, I always get the upgrade. So the luggage area, once I land, the passengers depart, now becomes my own little dressing room.
That is the best insider tip I have ever heard on this podcast. I am so happy you shared that. That's amazing. I hope all you pilots out there listen to that.
They should.
Joanna, what about the maintenance on the plane? You experienced flying a little bit older model and then now this newer model. Talk to me about the scheduled maintenance and that experience.
First and foremost, the Legacy has been extremely reliable for us. We've never missed a trip. We've been in the Legacy for over 4 years now. We've never missed a trip because of maintenance. The Embraer program is a scheduled maintenance program. It's a Chapter 5 aircraft, so people like us are operating under Part 91. We can use Part 91 409F and use the manufacturer scheduled program as our inspection cycle program. And when our Legacy 600 was Part 135, we followed the exact same inspection schedule published by Embraer. And they make it so simple. So every 6 months, essentially, you have an inspection. At the 6-month mark, usually it's something super simple and can be done just whenever the plane happens to be in town. And then once a year, you have a larger inspection, which would require anywhere from 5 days to up to 6 weeks to be down. What's great is we've had the experience of flying the Legacy 600, which is older. So we've now seen the 6-month inspections, the 12-month inspections, the 48-month inspections, the 72-month inspection. And then in the 600, we experienced the 192-month inspection, which is the 16-year inspection. So we saw the biggest inspection that a Legacy ever undergoes. And the budget that was given to us, or the quote that was given to us by the facility, came right on target. So our expense for that big 16-year inspection was $300,000, which in maintenance terms, that's nothing. When we looked at other aircraft, we were especially interested in the Global 5000 and the G450. We started, talking to maintenance facilities. Well, how much is your largest inspection? How much is it coming in at? And the numbers were astounding. They were very high. So to have the largest inspection on aircraft only come in at $300,000, I think is fantastic. The other great thing is availability of parts. The Legacy is a very common aircraft being flown by the regional jets. So should we find ourselves in a situation where we need a part quickly, it never is a problem finding that part and getting it right away.
That's a great point. I know you mentioned to me a few weeks ago when we were talking that you're involved in some things with Embraer. Can you talk a little bit about being an Embraer pilot from the standpoint of interacting with the company?
Yes, actually, Embraer is very unique in the sense that they're actually geared towards customer service. I mean, I know a lot of maintenance people are, but Scott and I are pilots, and we deal with the maintenance aspect of coordinating maintenance on the aircraft. We don't actually maintain the plane. However, Embraer is more than happy to discuss maintenance issues with us. They take the time for us. And they also do, once a year, they do an Embraer Operators Conference. So Scott and I in June were able to fly out to New Orleans, where it took place this year. And you get to meet these people you get to meet the parts people that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. We have a field tech rep that deals with us who is extremely helpful and makes himself available to us 24/7. But Embraer does a very good job on reaching out to their customers and looking for customer satisfaction.
Fantastic. What's the most interesting thing you learned at this year?
That's a good question.
I totally put you on the spot with that.
Did, absolutely. Well, I mean, I don't know that I learned anything super interesting. I did get to learn about the Boeing Embraer joint venture because as an operator of an Embraer aircraft, and you hear that another company is kind of coming in, it makes you wonder, well, how's that going to affect me as the customer? Because I'm an Embraer customer, but now Boeing has an 80% stake in the company? Are they still going to take my calls? Are they still going to have parts from my aircraft? So it was very educational to learn that that's not going to change at all.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much information about the Legacy 650 with me, Joanna. It's been incredible to talk to you about this.
Welcome. It's a pleasure.